Welcome to the Adoption Journey Podcast. It's your host, Tarsha Smith, and I want to welcome you to yet another week of your favorite adoption podcast. In the building, I am too excited to welcome Coco. Hey, Coco.
Hey, I'm so excited to be here.
She is another fellow adoptee, and you know how we do this. She's going to tell us our story, and we're just going to take her lead. All right, Coco. So one of the things out the gate, tell us your story, and to include how old you were when you found out and how you found out.
Okay.
Let's do
this. I don't exactly know how old I was when I found out, to be honest with you. Like, I've always known. And so we'll kind of dive into that a little bit later as to when I started to explore more about my adoption. My adoptive brother told me that he thinks that I was more told by proximity. So that I didn't really have like a sit down conversation with my parents. It was more like they told him, or my adoptive mother told him, and then he and my sister, my adoptive sister, like told me somehow. Because I don't have any recollection of knowing or finding out when I was adopted. I just know that I've always known.
Okay, are these siblings biological to you, or are
No,
they adopted
they are
also?
not. So I have quite the interesting family. So we've got some kinship adoption. We've got some domestic adoption as well. And then my adoptive father has a biological son. So we were all kind of like mixed up in there.
See, that's why I bought my tea.
Yeah. Look, you know, I'm at the Black Adoptea tea, okay? Because the tea is hot. So just to kind of start out with my story, growing up, my adoptive mother had really strong feelings about us talking about our adoption. So it wasn't something that we were really allowed to speak about openly.
Why? Do you know why?
I'm going to go as far as to say, like, with a lot of adoptive parents, and especially like in the Black community, we were just made to blend in. Gotcha. And that was sort of the sentiment that was given to us, like, you don't talk about this. We need people in our business. So it was really a lot of stuff like that, where she just, didn't want us to speak about it, probably had some shame around her own infertility experiences, and just really felt strongly about us not openly speaking about. And this went for even like our family. So we weren't allowed to like talk about it within our family. We weren't allowed to talk about it, with our like outside of our family, like, my uncles, cousins, and stuff like that. So we just was always something that we could.
And your mother adopted 3 kids? Did I understand?
So, yeah.
Okay. Wait, let me just wait for the tea.
Okay, so
let me
see. It's always interesting to break this down. So I'm adopted. I was in a domestic adoption, and then I have an adopted brother as well, who was also a domestic adoption. Both closed adoptions. Then I have a sister, who I call her my sister because that's all I know her by. But she's actually my mom's, my adoptive mother's biological niece. And then later on, she and my adoptive dad, adopted, or they didn't technically adopt. So they did legal guardianship with my sister. And then they took in her biological brother, like when he was in 6th grade or something like that. It was around that time. Okay. And then my dad had a biological son. So real kind of mixed up in there.
Yeah.
Definitely lots of dynamics going on.
Absolutely.
Yes. And so, like I said, like growing up, we weren't really allowed to talk about it. So I didn't explore it necessarily. Just like all adoptees, I think, always have like thoughts about adoption, like thinking, where am I from? Where do I get these features from? Because one thing was my adoptive mother is like very light skinned, like very, very, very light skinned. So it's not like I looked
Okay.
like her. And then my adoptive father is, although he's darker, he doesn't look like me. So,
Yes.
yeah, so it was kind of like we were just, and the odd thing is that my adopted brother and sister are the same age, except like they're like a month apart. So a lot of times people would be like, are y'all twins? But they look like literally nothing alike. So it was always kind of hard to
Yeah.
explain that to people, or just kind of like dodge that question, because but people knew that she was my mom's niece. It just, they didn't know that we were adopted. So that kind of was a hard dynamic, like growing up. And
Okay.
one thing is that I grew up in Orange County, California, so a little small town called Brea. Nobody usually knows where that is.
Oh,
And it's a predominantly white community. So
okay.
I grew up in an all white community. My dad played in the NFL. So, they had a little bit of money to be able to live in this community. And I grew up around all white people.
So did I.
So
So I
that was
understand.
an interesting, okay, so that was an experience just in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
Being adopted, growing up in this white community. And it really wasn't until I would say I was about 18 years old when I had more questions about like being adopted. When I met another adopted individual, and they
Was
told
that your
me,
first time meeting, outside of your family, was that your first time meeting
yeah,
another?
it was
Okay.
my first time having any contact with any other adopted individual besides my brother, which again, we didn't talk about adoption.
Talk about it.
So, right. So it was like that experience opened my eyes to a lot of things. It gave a lot of context to a lot of the questions that I had, and I got really curious. And this was again like when I was about 18 years old. So when that happened, I reached out to, so my adopted mother always told us, like, if you want to know anything, like, here's this, there's this letter in my drawer. And if you ever want to read it, like, you can read it.
Mm-hmm.
So I went rifling through her stuff, looked at the letter, found the name of the social worker who worked on my case, found that I was at Orangewood, which is an orphanage in Orange County. And I like reached out to Orangewood to see if that social worker was still working and if they knew anything about my biological family. Well, I got a letter from, actually it wasn't a letter. I spoke with someone, like a social worker, and they sort of gave me like a warning about opening Pandora's box. And they use that phrase, and they're like, I know this seems like a good idea, but when you go down this road, you want to be really careful about opening Pandora's box, because like once you open it, you can't go back. And hindsight is 2020, because because I'm telling you, that was really probably, I needed to heed that advice, but I didn't.
Of
At the
course.
time I did, actually. At the time it actually scared me. I was like, okay, maybe this isn't a good idea. So I actually went quite some time without like looking for people, doing any of that stuff. And then I would say I got to about 24, so 24, 25 years old. And someone sent me a message like, hey, is this you? This really looks like this could be your sister. And it looked exactly like me, right? And I was like, this is crazy. Like this person, whoever it was, looked exactly like me. And at that time, again, my interest was piqued. So I was like, you know what? Maybe it's time to look and try to figure some of this out. But unfortunately, like I didn't have any information. Like 1981, closed adoption, you're not getting no info, basically. Didn't
Right.
have names, any of that stuff. So fast forward to another like 10 years when I was about, I would say it was about 34, 32, 33, 34, somewhere around there.
You are
And
really sitting on this. Like,
yes,
yeah.
because you have to understand too, like when, again, this whole idea of like going against your parents, you know, I didn't want to go against my parents. And
Got it.
when I tell you that like my mom had like very strong feelings about this, like I remember
Yeah.
this one time my brother, one of his girlfriends like bought him a book about adoption and she like lost her mind. And this was like in her later in his life. Like he was probably like in his 20s or something like
I
that. And so
I
it was,
understand.
yeah, I was
Got it.
just like, you know what? I didn't want to like upset her. You know, we
Yeah.
spend our lives like people pleasing, you know what I mean? So it's like, I don't want to upset her. So fast forward in my 30s, I dated a psychotherapist, right? Fun times. And dating dating this psychotherapist, really, they were kind of like, you know what? You might want to look into this. Like, this might be affecting you a lot more than you think it
Mm.
is. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So at that point, I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a deep dive. And I did. So I hired a private investigator. His name is Jay, and I always butcher his last name. So I won't say his last name, but his name is Jay. He runs a website called the Birth Finder. Shout out to the Birth Finder.
Oh,
If
we
you,
just met. I know exactly
okay,
what you're talking about. Yeah.
he's so awesome. And he sort of has like a knack. I saw him actually on a show. I forgot which show it was, but it was like Evelyn Lozado, you know, from the Basketball Wives. Like she was finding her paternal grandfather. He helped her and everything. So I look him up, and it just so happens that he like is willing to help a lot of adopted people for like a nominal fee.
Yeah.
So at the time, like he was so cool, and he was like, I can help you. So again, very limited information. Like I knew that I was born at Hawaiian Gardens Hospital, which no longer is there, right
Mhm.
outside of Long Beach. You know, obviously I knew what year I was born. And he has access to something that's called the birth index. So the birth index is basically a record of all babies born at all hospitals, like all over the country. And him having access to that, he was able to find what my last name was, which I had never heard of it, never known it.
Mhm.
And the story that I had heard my whole life was that my biological mother was 16 years old. She couldn't keep me. That I was from the Virgin Islands. So it was like a lot of misinformation in there. And so Jay went digging. Unfortunately, he came up against like a lot of walls. So he suggested that I take a DNA test. And obviously, like lots of adopted people take DNA tests, and it's literally like the floodgates open. So take the DNA test, results come back, and literally within 48 hours, he had unraveled like this whole story, and he had found my biological family. And the
Oh,
crazy part,
let me
yeah.
stop you. Let me. You're helping me because I have found my maternal side, but I'm getting ready to take the DNA test with him for my
Okay.
paternal side. So is this what I have to?
Yes, like he's
Okay.
really good, and he's like a renowned private
Yeah.
investigator.
Yeah. We've talked.
Literally, yeah,
Yeah.
like going out of the country, finding people, like doing all kinds of stuff. Like he's really good at what he does. And
Okay.
actually he's actually interviewed me a couple times, so it's he's really cool. So once that happened, he what it was I matched with like a few second cousins. And the
Mm.
crazy part is right now I live in the Bay Area, and it just so happened that those cousins were living in the Bay Area. Like I'm telling you how God works, the universe works. Like a lot of adopted people experience this, right? Like this alignment that comes together when it comes to your biological family.
Yeah.
So they were living out here in the Bay Area. So one of my cousins actually was like living down the street from where I worked.
Wow.
And like a really prominent person, like in San Francisco, and really was like, you know, she's well known. And so when I looked her up on Facebook, it was, we had a mutual friend. So again, this is all like unbelievable that I have a mutual friend with someone who's my family member. So I reach out to her, and I also reach out to one of my other cousins, and I give him my spiel. Like, this is my name, you know, my last name is Brackett. My biological last name is Brackett. Found out that actually if my family, my biological family is from Belize, at least my maternal side, which made so much sense, right? Like the way I look, the gap in my teeth, the color of my skin, just so many things made sense when it came to that. And so I talked to my second cousin.
Wait. Hold on. I'm going to ask a question.
Okay.
Now, were you told the Virgin Islands, just someone just threw that out there, or do you even know?
That was in my non-identifying paperwork. So some social worker conjured up that information. And do you have that paperwork by chance?
Yeah. Mine actually panned out to be correct. At least on my maternal side, it actually, what was in there was true.
So a lot of times there's just like misinformation in there.
Yes, I'm learning that.
Definitely. So it was like, that was not the case. I think it was just like, okay, we're going to throw out some Caribbean, you know what I'm saying? A little razzle dazzle Caribbean up in there, and you'll be okay. So when I found my cousin, I called her and I was like, you know, do you know like who my mom is? And she's like, I don't really know. Well, at first I was like, could we be sisters, half sisters? And she was like, honey, I don't know, because my dad was a Rolling Stone, so it's a possibility. It's a possibility, right? And I was like,
and she was open to talking to you.
Yeah, she was super cool. She's so cool. I love her. And so that was like, she just didn't really know a lot.
Right.
And then there was another cousin that I reached out to via inbox. And so I gave her my spiel, let her know what I was doing. And she was like, can you call me? Then like, it was like the next day, right? So all this happened. I was at work. I'll never forget this. And I start Googling. And my partner at the time, like, he was helping me out. And he's like, I think I found who your mom is, right? And I'm like, oh my God, like, no way. And so Jay, I was talking to Jay, and Jay's like, I think I found your mom. And so I'm like, okay. And he was like, so what he does is like, he's like a middleman. So he's like, you know, he tries to soften things for people. So he'll go from the guise of like, hey, this person's looking for you. They really just want medical information. Sometimes that kind of puts people at ease, right?
Right.
So apparently she like wanted nothing to do with me. And I remember driving home that day and talking to him on the phone, and he was like, she was really upset, like that you found her. And she was willing to give me like, you know, brief medical information, but like, she really just does not want anything to do with it. Crying on the phone. And Jay being like, that's her loss. Like, he's really good. He's like a coach too.
Yeah.
So he really like empowered me around that. So that night I went home, and my cousin, her name is Joy, she had asked me to reach out to her. So when I reached out to her, that was when everything came together. And what my understanding was of the story was that nobody knew about me. And this is still true. Okay. This is like,
family secret.
Yeah, 36, like I'm 42. This was like years ago. And she basically told me that my biological mother went through like some pretty horrible traumas around my inception. And it sounds like my biological father was a really bad person. and that there was like a whole scandal in Belize around like what happened to her and other Belizean women that were terrorized by essentially like a gang of individuals called the Bishop Brothers. So apparently she was sexually assaulted, and so, you know, back at the time, like back in the 80s, that was like a very Catholic country. And so it sounds like she came over to the United States with my grandmother, and to like have the baby, do the whole adoption thing, and then the rest of her siblings stayed in Belize with my grandfather as well.
Okay.
So this was like when I was talking to Joy, she was like crying. She was like, "Oh my God, I cannot believe this." I remember back to like that summer when she was, you know, or actually that spring when she was 16 years old, and she like, you know, she wore baggy clothes. Like I figured that something was going on with her, but nobody could figure out like what was going on with her. And then also it sounds like she had a really hard life. Like she never got married. She was never like in any types of like relationships. And then I get the sense that she maybe struggled maybe with like substance abuse, depression, like things like that. So, Joy was like, you know, she gave me a lot of context to the story, just really kind of filling in a lot of holes for me. And then she connected me to my biological uncle, which is my bio mom's
brother.
So that was hard because when I spoke to him,
was he open to talking to you?
He was a little hesitant at first. Like he was really like just trying to see if I was going to go take my story to Oprah or something like that. Like he was really, yeah, he was. And very protective, you know, they were like a really close, tight knit family. So he's really protective, like over his sister, and essentially told me like, don't go rocking that boat. He was really, adamant about that. Like, that's not going to be good. Like, you found the best two people in the family. Like, trust me. And for a while, I accepted that, and then
I want to ask you that because I've been told that too. I've heard that same sentiment. Like, why you keep digging? What are you looking for? Why are you asking? Tell me what that feels like for you.
At the time, so the people pleaser in me was like, okay, you know, at first when I found them, I'm like, gosh, I'm so happy. Like, you know, I finally found family. Like, we all look alike. I mean, when I tell you I'm the spitting image of my auntie, like her sisters, like, I mean, we could be twins. So that also was scary, hurtful.
Yeah, it's weird.
It's very weird, right? And the thing is I have a biological son, and he was like my first known relative. You know, like he was my first blood relative. Like, you know, we look alike, but it's different. It's very different. So that really, like, at first I was okay with it, and then I don't know who got in my ear about it. Somebody must. So I was able to like be processing that at the same time. And during that time, like, I got upset. Like, I was enraged that, like, they were asking me after all this time to essentially, like, deny myself, deny what was going on. And it was I'm the child, right? So I felt like that's not my burden to carry. Like, I should be able to do this. I should be able to talk to her, you know, approach or whatever without people trying to like run interference. It felt like really, really unfair.
I think that's a good way to put it. I should be able, I like that. I should be able to ask these questions because I'm the child in this.
Exactly. And I was innocent.
It's unfortunate that I feel like the birth parents and even the birth family, those that know, and especially that were born around the time that we were, because I was in 75, so I'm not that much older. But
Yeah.
that sentiment that, all right, this is going to happen and we're going to give this baby up for adoption.
And like, I was never just a race. Like, it was
And it's
so
like, poof, gone, like never. And so it's real, it's like they're shocked
oh yeah.
when the adoptees pop back up. And like in something that I have heard that is in line with every adoptee I've talked to, when we start unraveling, it goes like this. It happens so fast and everything starts lining up.
Yes.
And so, yeah.
And it did. I mean, like, remember, they didn't know. And there was also like so many other layers to this story, like, and what happened to her. So they didn't know about me. Her brother didn't know about me. However,
Wow.
they always suspected. I think they always suspected something happened to her. And then they just turned a blind eye.
So she came to the United States with her mom and her siblings didn't even know what was happening?
No.
Wow.
No. They stayed over in Belize. And so they came over like at a later time. And there was at the time, I think there's 2 sisters and then Dan, the brother. So they didn't know anything, and she had that body type where, like, when you're younger, if you have a kid, like, you bounce right back. So nobody ever
bounce
really,
back is real.
yeah. So nobody like really questioned it. They just sort of like let life go on.
Right.
So fast forward, I was really upset and I stopped talking to my uncle Dan. Like, I blocked him. I was like, you know what? F this. Like, this is not the energy that I want. And I really started to like dive into my platform, right? So I started the Black Adoptea with the EA. I started advocating for people, talking to people, coaching people, and really just kind of like speaking out against adoption, and then like just some of the things that we go through as Black adoptees, which I think is different than transracial Black adoptees, right? Like, it's a very different experience. And I think it's a one that not enough people talk about, because there wasn't a lot of people, Black people, that were adopting back in those times. If you were adopted, like, as a Black kid, it was like a hush hush, because it was something odd. Like, it wasn't normal so
right.
Yeah.
And then you don't talk about it. And then look, we're in 2023 and they're almost still not talking about it.
Hello. Exactly. So it was like, I wanted to really like use my platform to like speak up and really talk about like what my experience was. And I've met so many amazing adoptees, like, who share the same kind of like stories and share some of the same feelings. And I have a relationship with some of my cousins, and one of my cousins, like, she thought it was like really important for her to like tell my story, which
Absolutely.
one of the things I do feel strongly about is like adoptees telling their own story and not other people feeling like they can tell their story for them. And one of the things that she did, unfortunately, was go and like kind of force feed me to like my biological mother's sisters. And that just didn't go over well. They were like, we don't care who this person is. We don't want to talk to her. We don't want to see her. And like, cut me off. And at the time, I remember I was like, kind of like, I'm going to use this loosely, but like stalking like my biological auntie, because I just was like curious, and followed her, like her posts, and she would like some of my stuff, and she didn't know who I was. I'm sure she probably looked at me like, dang, why she look so much like me? You know what I mean? And then when that happened, she blocked me. And so that was really hurtful. They kind of blocked her out of the family, my cousin, because she was like, trying to advocate for me. And it was just a really, really hard situation. And in that time, like, my biological grandmother passed away. So I never got to see her. I never got to talk to her. And I think she would have wanted to know me. I think she would have wanted to, and she took that to her grave, like this
Yeah.
idea that she, helped my biological mom like hide all this stuff. So that was really hard. That was really a hard situation. Um, so lots of therapy.
Lots of
Definitely like
therapy.
lots of
I,
therapy.
I'm just trying to process your aunts.
Hmm.
I guess the whole family just was hurt by this situation.
Yes.
And you popping back up kind of just brought up these feelings.
Hmm.
But on the flip side of that, I guess I just don't understand why people have a hard time understanding when the child pops back up. Like
Right.
you are
Right.
just a product of what happened. You are not the one that did these things.
Right.
And so it's just hard for me to understand why people get so angry. Like, I guess it's twofold. Like it's the
Yeah.
hurt, but you're still a human being. I'm
Exactly.
still here. And regardless of how you got here, I'm a part of you.
Yeah.
I am blood. I am your daughter. I'm your niece. I'm your cousin, granddaughter,
Right. All of that. All of
all
that.
that.
Yes. So painful to like such a shared experience with other adoptees. Like, and it's like that secondary rejection.
Yeah.
Like that was something else that I had to really face at that point in my life. Dang, why is this person like rejecting me again? I spent all this time and energy, and you have like, what is it, the ghost kingdom, right? When you're younger, um, fantasize about like what it's going to be like to find your biological parents, who they're going to be, and they're going to be these great people, and they're going to love me, and they're going to open me,
And they're
welcome me
gonna,
in
yeah,
arms,
they're gonna be like, "Hey, girl."
and it
It
just
might not
wasn't
always go like that.
like that. It was not like that at all. And granted, like I've met some great people out of that, and I love my cousins; they're amazing, but they're not my mom, you know, and that part
But
hurts.
something else I found too, and what's true for me, like I have met my biological mom, but my relationship with her versus with my biological brothers, which I found, which they didn't
Mm.
know anything about me when I found them.
Oh wow.
Yeah, because I am baby number 2
Okay.
yeah. And so, and cousins and
Hmm.
aunts, like I found them, and then my birth mother. I think had it been the other way around, I don't know how it would have gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but my relationship with my brothers is very different than that
Mm.
of my mother. My mother too, I believe, has experienced a lot of trauma behind the birth of me, even the birth of my brother, and just
Yeah.
things that she went through, substance abuse,
Yeah.
all that.
So
And
common. Yeah.
so when we speak, it's still very surface level. And I
Yeah.
found them in 2012.
Oh wow, that's a long time.
Yeah, it's not
Oh
like I
wow.
just popped up.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think I have come to the terms with, you know what, this is hard for her.
Yes. Yes.
And I just have
So
to be okay with that.
that's something that I worked a lot on was forgiveness, right? And forgiving her, and also like as someone who's going to be a future therapist, future counselor, I really sort of delved into like understanding like where she was, and a lot of times we get trapped at the age of our like traumas, right? So
Mhm.
she was 16 when this happened to her, 15, 16 when this happened to her. Her mind is trapped there, and I'm sure she's not done the work in order to unlock her mind, to
So
really get to that space. And so when she heard about me, boom, it took her right
took
back
her
to that
right back.
place, and everything that happened. And this was like something really heinous, like really heinous that
Yeah.
happened to her. And I didn't find out even more about that until later when I reconnected with my uncle. And
Oh, you reconnected.
I did reconnect with him. It was like maybe it was during COVID. So it wasn't that long ago, maybe like a year and a half ago. And I just really wanted to know about my biological father's side. And sometimes, the story gets so convoluted that you don't know.
Really jumped in Pandora's box.
I did. Let me tell you, I did. And it was not, again, no bueno. Like, it was not good.
Oh.
So I knew another adoptee who's a genealogist. She's amazing. A shout out to Ann Greb. So she helped me. You get your DNA, but sometimes it's hard to kind of go through it and like really understand like what's a second cousin, what is something first removed, and all this stuff. So she really went through all my information with a fine-tooth comb. And her first like advice was like, maybe you should just revisit it. Maybe you should just kind of ask them if they know any information. So I remember I was on my way to Seattle to meet another adoptee who I adore, by the way, Sean. And I go to, I'm getting ready to go. And I had texted him like a real kind of like, well, I went crazy. I was like, you know how it gets. I was like, hey, like, I just want this information. I don't want anything else. Like, if you don't give me this information, then I'm essentially going to like go public with this whole entire story. I did. He was like, I don't take kindly to threats, and like, I'll be sure to like send this to the police. And I'm like, send what to the police?
I'm looking.
Come on, bro. Like, nah. So when he said that, like, we're kind of going back and forth via text, and then he called me like out of the blue. So I answered the phone, and he was like really upset, and we had this like really emotional conversation. And I'm like, what happened? Like, why are you guys so like touchy around this? Like what really happened? And I had known some stuff here and there just from like being on message boards for Belize, and Belize City is very small, very, very small. So
I've been there.
Okay, so everybody knows everybody, and apparently like people really knew this story about like what happened. And so he was just like, I don't know, but I sensed that he knew more than he was saying. And so I had gotten some information from like another cousin, and they had told me that like basically the gist of the story, like there was a party that she went to, like, and like things went bad, and then maybe there's some kind of ransom type thing in there, and so it was like wild. So it's like wild story. So him and I, like, we started talking, and then one Sunday, like, I just asked him, like, do you know this name? Like, who are the Bishop brothers? Like, are they, like, because I also heard that they were, like, a gang. So it was hard to know, like, really ascertain, like, okay, are they a gang? Is this their real last names? Like, what is it? So he was just like, I don't know. And he was really upset. And then he just, like, told me the whole story. And so he essentially carried this for like years, like this really immense guilt, probably still has it, for what had happened to his sister while like she was supposed to be on his watch, basically. Yeah. So I don't think he ever really like forgave himself for that. And then again, like to have me come out of all of that.
Okay, well, who are the Bishop brothers?
Well, I'm still trying to figure all of that out. Like,
okay.
Yeah, so I never, with reunion, it's tricky. Like, I go back and forth, and I think you have to have the bandwidth for it. So for me, like, I'll dive in a little bit and then I'll come back out, because it's like I can only do so much. I
can only take this in teaspoons.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also, I've changed. I've healed a lot. I don't have that sense of urgency, that sense of desire to find anymore because I feel like I'm a whole person, like no matter what.
Yeah.
And knowing that my biological father was like essentially like a diabolical person, it's not something that I necessarily want to go too deep into just
Yeah.
to protect my own spirit. And I'll tell you, I had this really odd, it was so odd conversation. This was actually like back in February. And I had put my information on 23andMe. So I just have like, my information on a couple of those sites. And this guy contacted me and he's like, I have reason to believe that our fathers were brothers. And I'm like, why would he send this message to me? Like, that means he must know, like, how does he know, that I'm adopted? Like, whatever information. So get on the phone with him. And he is like my second cousin. So there is like, some kind of a link. But it turns out that he didn't know his biological father very well. And the person who he was thinking was possibly my father was like my third cousin or like my second.
Okay. So there is a link
He
there.
didn't really know. Yeah, he didn't really know. But I'm telling you, talking to him, he was so damn crazy. Like, and I could just figure that out just because of the work I do, like I work in mental health. So it's like I can figure that out pretty quickly. And just for having this conversation with him. However, he spoke about like a deep curse, like on my father's side of the family. And he talked about how this was a part of his life, like how he was vague but not. And then I was like, hold up, don't be trying to put that on me because they're not my family, that ain't my curse. Don't put that on me. So I was over here saging everything, what I'm saying? Like, don't do it. But there's something about DNA, right? And he said something so poignant to me. He was like we pay for like the sins of our ancestors.
Generational curses.
Woo! And I was like, you need to get off my phone.
Get off right now.
Right now. Right? But
because it stops here.
Oh yeah, no, I'm the curse breaker for sure.
Yeah.
But that also kind of made me, take a step back and be like, I don't know if I want to go too deep into it. You know what I mean? I was like, I don't know.
So we got to loop back around. So you have jumped in, and I'm sorry I didn't ask a lot of questions because you had me like.
Sometimes I'm all over the place with
That's
it.
okay, but you did all this, and I know how your adopted mother, her feelings. So what's Mama saying?
So I'm actually no contact with her. So a few years, I would say 2 years ago, about 2 years ago, it feels like a while, my adopted brother and I decided that we would remove ourselves from that situation in that family. So that was a really hard decision for me. Probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do because that's the only mom that I've ever known.
Was it because you went down this reunification, or was it other?
No, it was because like she just wasn't a very good mom. And I find that there's a, and I would like to do more research in this area. There's a link between narcissism and narcissistic qualities. We won't necessarily diagnose it as like straight up narcissist, but narcissistic tendencies and adoption.
Can you dive in or touch on that?
Yeah. So, growing up, like I would feel like my adoptive mother didn't really like me. I would feel like she didn't really accept me. She would be like pretty emotionally abusive, I would say. Yeah, like at times just a lot of things over the years that really made me feel like having her in my life wasn't beneficial. And especially like as a child, like I think like she was very cold. Like she would do things like like I said, telling us not to talk about adoption. She almost would act like jealous of me at times when it came to like my adoptive dad. Like she was like sort of the gatekeeper of him and the relationship. So anything was always like facilitated through her. She was like
So
very
I'm sorry. So your adopted dad would be okay with talking about it, but she was like,
no, he wouldn't be okay with talking about it. But my adoptive dad was like, he's a really good person. Like he's really kind, really, but also like slightly removed. So your typical, I think, dad from that era, like just goes to work, you know, is
okay.
at work all day, you know, sort
So
of
is it fair to say that if she wasn't how she was about it, then it would have been a whole different story?
me and my brother talk about this all the time. Like if she
Okay.
wasn't in the picture, like we would have had an amazing life because she was the one that sort of made things really difficult for all of us. And I would say my adoptive dad, like he was just kind of complicit, you know, like that's something that I've had to like come to terms with. Love him to death, you know, he's always been a good person. And again, I think it's hard to separate this idea of having a good life versus like being taken care of, like emotionally, like having all your needs met. So people look at us a lot of time like, oh, you guys grew up in Orange County. Oh, you were always like, you know, clothed and fed. And those are important things. But emotionally, we were left out to dry a lot of times.
Oh,
And it was really hard to like reconcile that, especially like I didn't really understand it until I was an adult and sort of would see these things. And I'm like, wait, hold up. Like, first of all, why are you talking to me like that? Why are you like stonewalling me, you know, a lot of times, and making me feel always like I'm doing something wrong. And so it was a really hard decision to just take a step back from that situation. And
did you
mind
just
you,
stop talking, or did you say, okay, this is sorry, but this is what it's about to be?
so the way that it happened was that um, I hadn't like her and I always had a really labored relationship. So we
Okay,
never had a good relationship. She was
got
never
you.
like I said, never like a good mom to me. Like we didn't talk on the phone. She didn't call me. But things changed a little bit when I had my son. So she really wanted to be like a grandparent, and so I allowed her to be that. And there was a time where like she got sick, but she would also sort of randomly be sick. Like I felt like she would um, get sick and sort of conjure up like because she wanted like sympathy and stuff like that, which is also like a narcissism type thing, right? So very common. So always wanting, you know, lots of attention. If the attention wasn't on her, then she would be upset. Well, I moved away from Southern California like about 12 years ago, and to get separation from her mostly.
Mm.
And when I moved away, like I would just have like, you know, sort of limited interactions. Like I would go home every once in a while and stuff like that, but it was just that. And I remember this one time she got sick, and I was at our house, like the house that I grew up in, and I drank like, I don't know, like some kind of wine or something, like drink that she had. And mind you, she was like in the hospital, like we were thinking she was gonna die, all this stuff. And the first thing that she did when she came out of the hospital was like criticize me for like having a drink of like whatever the special drink that she felt like she had. When I was like there for her, like I drove down from, you know, my job, like I took time off, like I was out like pouring in, and she was like so upset about that. So that really like triggered me because I was like, this what you worried about? And then like my siblings like got all into it. And I was always the one, I was like the black sheep of the family because I would always recognize that things weren't right, and I would like tell her about herself, you know. So then I became the person who like had the sharp mouth, or you know, I was always
The
checking
one
her.
that's always stirring the pot.
Yeah, that was me. That was me. Hey, I'll own it now. I don't care. So I was known as that person. And so her and I would like butt heads a lot. And then finally, when she kind of like pulled that last sort of thing, and I was like, you know what? Told her about herself one last time and was like, I can't deal with you anymore. And on the heels of that, I don't know if it was before or after. I think it was somewhere in between there, but like my brother, he was having like similar problems with her and was like, starting to speak up for himself. And when he started to speak up for himself, that's when things changed. And she like got really upset. So I'm not sure what exactly the incident was specifically that culminated in all this, but I just remember she cut me off. This is the thing, a lot of things that people don't understand about the story, but I don't try to tell people or write the story or tell, because it's my story and what people think really doesn't matter to me. But she actually cut me off. I just told her, stand 10 toes down. You're not going to throw me away anymore. You're not going to cut me off anymore and think that I'm going to come back. And that was the last of it. And so she tried little things like send my son some gifts and, do some like manipulative stuff. But I was just like, you know what? It's time. Like spirit is calling me to make this change in my life. And unfortunately, at the time, my father was already, had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Oh. So it was, he was already kind of slipping away. Like last time I saw him, like he knew us and recognized us, but he was going down that path. Yeah. And when I made the decision to stop talking to her, like she blocked me from talking to him, speaking to him. Yeah. So I kind of like lost both of them at the same time, unfortunately. Yeah. Yeah, it was rough. It was really rough.
Yeah, especially it seems like, you would like to have that relationship, at least with your dad.
I love my dad. I love my dad so much. I posted about this the other day about how it's hard, to grieve a parent that's alive. And people who go no contact can probably attest to this, like how it's a special kind of hell to have to grieve somebody who's still alive because your brain, that attachment wants to reconnect with them. Even with my mom, like I love her, I've always loved her. But I know what's best for me now. So I don't try to go back. And I pray about it. I call her back to me in those ways and also like pray for my dad. And if she ever reached out or whatever, like maybe the door would be open. She would have to come correct. But like, yeah, I don't have any animosity towards her because I think that not enough people talk about what adoptive mothers go through in infertility and how that, how we become a perpetual reminder of that. And so, and if you don't deal with that trauma, then that can be projected onto your adoptive kids. That's what I felt my whole life, is this projection of, I'm not really probably the baby that you really wanted. You wanted your own. And that can be said, like, that can be talked about. And I think one time I said,
that is a deep statement.
It is. And a lot of people don't want to talk about, they don't want to admit that. A lot of adoptive parents is like, oh, I love you. Oh, no. But we can talk about what brought us to this point, especially when it has to do with infertility. And I made this analogy one time that sometimes being an adoptive child feels like being the understudy to a dead baby, because we are constantly, and what an understudy is there to fill in, right? Yeah. And so for me, I felt that stress my whole life, and the body keeps a score. Great book. Stays in you, trapped in you, all over. And I was never able to release that until I was able to start talking about how these things affected me really deeply, really deeply.
And now I have said that adoptive parents, birth parents, even adoptees, definitely should have access to free therapy, because it's a lot. It is a lot. But never, ever have I heard anybody until right now say that feeling like the understudy. That,
Yes.
whew.
They need to offer like family therapy to adoptive families, because I think that family therapy is really helpful and really useful. Like, yes, we need individual therapy, but a lot of times it's the dynamics that go on in adoptive families that really break down adoptees. Is how many different dynamics do you have? Again, we had biological sibling, or we had my dad's biological son. Then my mom's, she was her biological niece. So even though that wasn't her daughter, she still had a genetic mirror.
Right.
She still had a genetic family to have reference to. And she knew who her mom was and everything.
Right.
That her mom was around at some point in time, like during our lives. And she didn't know her father. So it's like, those kind of situations, like those dynamics, there's so many unspokens in there, and they just don't get talked about. And then you have resentment, you have, so many different things that go into that just don't get talked about.
And probably adoptive parents, especially adoptive mothers, they may not even realize they're doing it.
Exactly.
Because in their mind, I love you. I want to be your parent. I wanted a child.
Exactly.
But then they're projecting and not even realize they're projecting.
Yeah. And so I give my adoptive mother grace, because the trauma of losing a child, that's something that I've had to deal with in my own life. And I don't wish that on anybody, like having to know what that feels like.
Mm-hmm.
And so that when that happened to me, I was able to really even more empathize with her.
Now, did your adoptive mother suffer a miscarriage?
She did. Okay. She had like I think more than one, a really late term one.
Oof. Okay.
Yeah. So that's hard too, right? Like having a late term miscarriage is really difficult, for sure.
Oh, girl.
Yeah.
Listen.
And so, but then that hardened her, like that made her so hard. That she just was she was like an emotional wall. She never emoted at all. I don't know that in all my years I maybe seen her cry like, I don't know, 2 or 3 times at best. Yeah. She was very unemotional.
Coco.
Yeah. I know, all of that.
I want to end with this. I want you to speak to the adoptees. If you had anything to say to the adoptees, what would you say?
If I had anything to say to adoptees, it is speak your truth. It is speak it loud, speak it to the walls, speak it to your pillows, just speak. Because a lot of times that's the problem, is that like we get conditioned as adopted people to not share our stories, to not speak what's inside of us. And the minute I did that, the minute my life changed, it changed so much for the better. So speak your truth whenever you get a chance. Yell it, scream it from the rooftops, because that right there, there's so much healing in being able to tell your story.
And it's therapeutic, for sure. For sure. Yeah, y'all, family, please go follow her Instagram.
Yes, follow me.
The Black Adoptea, and it's TEA.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Like a T. Yeah. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you.
Whew. I wasn't ready for that ride. I'm never ready for these rides. I never ever know what you all are going to come here and tell me. And it's always different. It's always fascinating, and that's why I love doing this, because I want to help people to speak. Tell your story, because it's so important.
So much. It's so important. These platforms are very, very important. So that we can be heard. So thank you, and all the people who hold the space for us adoptees to just
absolutely
tell our story.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yes. All right, y'all. Well,
all right.
it's been another. Ooh, another episode of the Adoption Journey podcast. And until next week, bye, family.
All right. We'll see you.